The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as Ambassador Thexran's voice echoed through the crystalline halls. His four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he delivered what he believed would be humanity's final judgment. Species designation: human. Planet of origin: Earth. Status: quarantined indefinitely. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the defendant's podium, her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, representatives from 47 different species watched with varying degrees of sympathy, indifference, and poorly concealed glee. The Zephyrian delegation's tentacles writhed with what passed for amusement among their kind. "The evidence is overwhelming," Thexran continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Humans are too unpredictable, too volatile, too dangerous to be permitted among civilized species. Your kind thrives on conflict, revels in chaos, and finds humor in the most inappropriate circumstances." Sarah's lips twitched almost imperceptibly. "Furthermore," the ambassador pressed on, "your species has demonstrated a disturbing tendency to laugh in the face of adversity. This psychological dysfunction makes you unsuitable for diplomatic relations with stable, rational beings." The chamber erupted in approving clicks, buzzes, and harmonic tones from the assembled delegates. Only the Keeper, an ancient being whose species had long since transcended physical form, remained silent, observing with interest that bordered on curiosity. Sarah cleared her throat. "May I respond, Your Honor?" Thexran waved a dismissive appendage. "Speak if you must, though your words cannot change the Council's decision." "Well," Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "I have to admit you've got us pretty well figured out." She paused, scanning the faces and face analogs of the assembled representatives. "We do laugh at inappropriate times. We do find humor in the darkest moments. And yes, we absolutely thrive on what you call chaos." Murmurs of confirmation rippled through the crowd. "But," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, "you've made one fundamental error in your analysis." She gestured toward the massive view screen that dominated the chamber's far wall. "Computer, display Earth's cultural exports over the past century." The screen flickered to life, showing a cascade of images: comedy shows, stand-up routines, satirical cartoons, memes, and footage of humans laughing together across every continent. "You see laughter as a weakness," Sarah said, her voice now carrying a warmth that seemed to fill the cold chamber. "You see humor as dysfunction, but you've missed the most important truth about humanity." The images on the screen shifted to show humans in crisis. Natural disasters, conflicts, hardships. But in every scene, there they were, people helping each other, sharing moments of levity even in the darkest times, finding reasons to smile. "We don't laugh because we're broken," Sarah explained. "We laugh because laughter is how we heal, it's how we bond, it's how we survive things that would crush other species." Ambassador Thexran's primary eyes narrowed. "Irrelevant emotional displays do not—" "Let me tell you a story," Sarah interrupted, and something in her tone made even Thexran pause. 3 months ago, our colony ship Perseverance suffered catastrophic engine failure in the Kepler system. 200 souls aboard. Life support failing. No hope of rescue." The chamber had grown completely still. "By your calculations, Ambassador, they should have despaired. Should have accepted their fate with the quiet dignity you so admire." Sarah's smile was small but radiant. "Instead, do you know what they did?" She touched her wrist communicator. Suddenly, the chamber filled with sound. Laughter, music, voices raised in song. The view screen showed the interior of the damaged ship, where humans were gathered in the main bay, sharing stories, performing impromptu comedy routines, singing together as their vessel drifted through space. "They threw a party," Sarah said simply. 200 people facing certain death, and they decided to go out laughing. They told jokes about their situation. They performed comedy skits about incompetent space engineers. They laughed until they cried, and then they laughed some more. The recording continued, showing something remarkable. In the midst of their celebration, the humans had continued working. Their laughter hadn't stopped them from trying every possible solution, hadn't prevented them from supporting each other through the crisis. And that's when the miracle happened, Sarah continued. One of their comedians, a young man named David Park, made a joke about the engine failure. Something about how the quantum manifold was probably just having a bad day and needed cheering up. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Zephyrians had stopped their tentacle writhing entirely. It was a stupid joke, scientifically nonsensical. But it made everyone laugh, and in that moment of shared joy, something clicked for their chief engineer. She realized they'd been approaching the problem all wrong. They didn't need to fix the engine. They needed to convince it to work differently. The view screen now showed the Perseverance limping into port at the Kepler station, its crew still laughing, still celebrating. They saved themselves with laughter, Ambassador. Not in spite of it, but because of it. Because humor opens minds. Because joy creates connections. Because when humans laugh together, we become more than the sum of our parts. Sarah looked directly at Thexran now, her expression serious but kind. You want to quarantine us because we're unpredictable, because we laugh at the wrong times, because we refuse to accept that any situation is hopeless. She spread her arms wide, addressing the entire assembly. But consider this. In a universe full of species that have learned to accept limitations, that respond to crisis with resignation, that face the unknown with fear, wouldn't you want at least one species that responds to the impossible by telling jokes? The Keeper's voice resonated through the chamber for the first time, ancient and thoughtful. The human speaks wisdom. Laughter is not dysfunction, it is transcendence of circumstance. Furthermore, Sarah added, grinning now, you're already too late for quarantine. Our comedy shows have been broadcasting across the galaxy for decades. Half your populations are already addicted to human humor. The Altarian Prime Minister was just caught binge-watching Earth sitcoms last week. A wave of what could only be described as embarrassed silence swept through several delegations. So here's humanity's counter-proposal, Sarah concluded. Instead of quarantining us, why don't you let us teach you something about the power of laughter? Because honestly, looking around this chamber, you all could use a good joke or two. As if on cue, she pulled out a small device and pressed a button. The chamber filled with the sound of a rubber chicken. The silence that followed was profound. Then, impossibly, a small chuckle came from the Keeper's section. It was joined by a nervous twitter from one of the Centauran delegates. Someone, possibly a Rigelian, let out what sounded suspiciously like a snort. And then Ambassador Thexran, pillar of dignity and cosmic authority, looked at the rubber chicken in Sarah's hand and began to laugh. Within moments, the entire Galactic Council was in chaos, the good kind. 47 species, each expressing mirth in their own unique way, creating a symphony of joy that had never before been heard in those ancient halls. When the laughter finally died down, the vote was unanimous. Humanity's quarantine was lifted, and Earth was formally invited to establish a new diplomatic position, Galactic Ambassador of Humor. Sarah Chen accepted the role with a smile. After all, someone had to teach the universe how to laugh at itself.